So what can we expect then, Aiden? What do you think we can expect?
Torture.
No.
Graham Phillips.
Graham Phillips. How not to do an interview. We're heading off to the prison where we're going to pretty much speak to, hopefully, some prisoners, Russian prisoners, who and their motivation to come in to kill Ukrainians and invade Ukraine. We're also looking at who's looking after their welfare following the Geneva Conventions and the Ukrainian guidelines on visiting the site. We want to know how they're being kept, and we are going to compare, but we're not here to make their life miserable, even more miserable. We're here to really gain information about, if anything, how Ukraine are treating Russian prisoners of war. So it's going to be quite interesting. I'm with your man Cossackgundi.
It's going to be fun. A fun-filled day of activities and watching people make things.
Yeah, apparently they do that shit.
I'm just looking forward to the food.
Yeah, back to marine grade Grechka.
It's even better than marine grade.
Is it?
Yeah.
It's interesting. Aiden's been before, so we're looking at, like I said, I think this is a subject that really isn't talked about very much. And we've got a unique perspective on that, being held captives in Russia. We can put our 2 cents in and report with some real clarity on how prisoners are treated from both sides. So it's going to be an interesting day.
Before visiting the prison, I spoke with legal experts, including former US Congressman Adam Kinzinger. I wanted to get some grounding and understand where the law actually stands. Generally, under the Third Geneva Convention, any fighter who wears a uniform, carries arms openly and follows a chain of command is entitled to POW status. Aiden and I were denied that right in Russia, despite serving legally in Ukraine. Meanwhile, Russia sends foreign recruits, migrants, ex-convicts and coerced men into battle with little training or legal standing. Are they lawful soldiers or just disposable mercenaries? Even Russia contradicts itself. Here's Adam to explain more.
Hey, I'm Adam Kinzinger. I was a U.S. congressman for 12 years, dealing with foreign affairs, sitting on the Foreign Affairs Committee. I also served 22 years in the United States Air Force as a pilot. I was in the Air Combat Command, Air National Guard, and served time in the Air Force Special Operations Command, where I went through multiple levels of SEER training and understanding of both how to resist, but also what the Geneva Convention requires and how to utilize that.
How are foreign combatants, those not born in Russia but recruited to fight for it, legally classified under international humanitarian law, especially the Third Geneva Convention?
So foreign combatants, anybody recruited to fight in any armed force, whether it's the Russian, whether it's Ukrainian, and they enlist into the military, the reasons don't matter. So the motivation to get there doesn't matter. If you are legally enlisted to fight for that armed force or for their military, then you have Geneva Convention coverage. You should be treated as any other soldier, as any other combatant, with the rights and, in some cases, privileges that come with that, obviously based on rank and status and things along that line. So why a foreign fighter would decide to join a military force has nothing to do with whether or not the Geneva Convention would protect it. And when we talk about mercenary forces specifically, again, if somebody is foreign but enlists into the military of a certain country, that's been done through history. Even in the United States, there were German mercenaries that came and fought in the Civil War. And even though there was no Geneva Convention, they were considered legal combatants for the Union or for the South. And so mercenary is really hard thing to prove. How do you prove what a mercenary unit is? I suppose if, for instance, you're on the battlefield with like Wagner or something and they're not flying a national flag, you could that way. There were some arguments about whether Al-Qaeda is considered stateless, in which case they're not covered by the Geneva Convention. But in traditional modern warfare, there is no provision that makes a difference for somebody that originated from a foreign country that's still fighting for a country legally under their armed forces.
Is Russia legally obligated to include foreign combatants in prisoner exchanges under the current international law or agreements? If not, what mechanisms, if any, exist to pressure Russia into doing so?
So Russia's not required, Ukraine's not required, no country is required to trade prisoners during a war. The point of holding prisoners is to, without death, affect the opponent's ability to go to war, to have combat. It weakens their numbers. So there's no requirement to do prisoner exchanges. But everything that I understand, given that, again, somebody who's maybe from a different country, but legally under the armed forces of Russia, Ukraine, whatever force fighting, if there are going to be exchanges of prisoners, that anybody should be considered with the same reason to be exchanged. So if you're from a different country, you should still get due regard with regards to being exchanged back to Russia. And I think that just makes sense. Well, again, under the Geneva Convention, there's no difference. So when a country is fighting to bring its people back, there's really no reason that they shouldn't be included in that. They are just as much a legal combatant as anybody else.
Have you seen any trends or changes in how Russia treats its own foreign fighters compared to ethnic Russian POWs in terms of legal representation, sentencing, or repatriation efforts?
I can't really speak to whether I've seen any trends or changes in how Russia has dealt with its own folks in terms of, whether or not to give them due regard in trades and things like that. What I can say is we have seen a serious increase in the number of foreign fighters that have been recruited into Russia to join their armed forces to fight. The motivations could range anything maybe from money to a chance for citizenship or just a chance to escape the poverty of their country. And so we have seen a significant increase in the number of foreign combatants coming in and wearing the Russian flag. I think that shows obviously personnel challenges and everything else. But in terms of have they treated them differently, that's not something I can speak to.
From your experience, are the existing Geneva Convention definitions and classifications of POWs still adequate in modern conflicts like Ukraine? Or are there emerging gaps, especially with regard to mercenaries, Wagner fighters, and conscripted migrants?
So when it comes to traditional conflicts, so what we're seeing, for instance, in Russia and Ukraine, I think the Geneva Convention still very well covers that conflict. Again, the things that it says is, if you're wearing a uniform under the flag of a country, you're enlisted in those countries, in that country's military, you are, according to your ID, according to the provisions of the convention, you are legally required to get those protections. And both sides obviously should comply with that, although that is not always the case. And certainly we've seen that many times over the past, frankly, 3 years of this war, and we see that through history. There are some emerging gaps, although I would argue that really throughout history there have been such things as mercenaries. There have been foreign fighters joining militaries to fight for whatever reason. Maybe it's a chance for citizenship in that country. Maybe it's for money. Maybe it's, I don't know, it could even be things like boredom. That doesn't matter. And so while there's always been mercenary forces, there's always been foreign fighters, that's pretty much covered it. Where there have been gaps in the Geneva Convention, which is something that I don't think even back when the Geneva Convention was being argued, anybody really could perceive would happen someday, is the idea of stateless actors. So again, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, these groups that are terrorist groups that don't have a state, they don't fight under uniform, they don't fight under a flag. What happens if they're captured? Now, typically in the United States, for instance, we treat them with Geneva Convention protection, with the exception of, since the war has continued, we've kept some people, a very few, in detention for a very long time. Technically till the end of that fight against Al-Qaeda, but also we do consider the fact that we are giving Geneva Convention protections, that we are allowing, inspections of their conditions to be in essence, a kindness out of our heart and not something that is required by the Geneva Convention when fighting a stateless actor. But if there ever is a point in the future where I guess there's amendments or updates to the Geneva Convention, which seems pretty impossible nowadays, that would be an area where I think there should be some discussion.
What legal or humanitarian risks do Ukraine and its partners face in detaining and eventually exchanging foreign Russian fighters, particularly if their home countries won't take them back or deny responsibility for them?
I don't think that Ukraine necessarily faces legal risk in its detention of foreign fighters for Russia. I think Russia can face legal risk, particularly if Russia trades for them or you come to an end of the conflict and these foreign fighters, again, fighting legally under the flag of Russia, enlisted in the Russian military, it becomes the Russian military's responsibility. So what happens when these people go back to Russia? Is there a process, for instance, for them to be integrated into the Russian community? Do Russians make a decision to deport them to their country of origin? That is a question for Russia and for their immigration policies. In some cases, as we've seen in the past in past conflicts, when a war ends, people that are in POW camps in that country may, depending again on how the war ends, choose to stay in that country. And if that's the case, I could see a situation where some of these foreign fighters that aren't naturally Russian by birth would choose to stay in Ukraine, particularly if they went to Russia just to find better opportunity. I don't think there's going to be a lot of great opportunity in Russia in the future. So they may choose to stay in Ukraine, and Ukraine has a decision similar to any country that has immigration. You can either create a legal process for them to stay, or you can create a process for deportation. And so I don't think there's necessarily legal risks to Ukraine specifically. There may be some to Russia, but again, legal risks are only enforced by that own country's court. And so Russia would have a decision to make, and so would Ukraine, but it would be through kind of a natural immigration process.
So there you have it. It doesn't matter where you come from, who you are, or what your motivations might be. If you're officially enlisted by a government and fight under its flag, then if you're captured, you should expect to be treated under the Geneva Conventions. That's the law, that's the standard. The prisoners you're about to see and hear from are treated accordingly. And if we were going to speak to them, we'd have to follow the same rules. Before any interview took place, our conditions were pretty much clear. They'd had to agree, knowing we weren't journalists, but former Russian POWs ourselves. Their identities would be protected, and the information gathered would be used to better understand why prisoners not born in either Russia or Ukraine are not currently being exchanged.
Wagner, да? Я говорю про My dom Mariupol. Я не journalist. Я солдат. Москва пехота Украины. So, спасибо.
With my clunky Russian and a translator on standby just in case, we were introduced to our first prisoner from Wagner PMC, a group steeped in controversy. Wagner is infamous for its brutal methods of punishment, often symbolised by a sledgehammer. It was founded by Dmitry Utkin, a former GRU officer, and more famously led by Yevgeny Prigozhin. Even the name Wagner is a chilling reference taken from Adolf Hitler's favourite composer.
Машинка Украина.
Asking about conditions in Russian prison.
You want to know?
Хочешь знать, в каких условиях он был в тюрьме? Интересно.
It's very public knowledge. I was stabbed in the leg.
Все об этом знают, это через интернете. Много. Этажом много проездов.
Electrocuted here.
Электрика, за уши.
And then суд, given death penalty.
Суд и в суде ДНР.
He tells me he's a former prisoner in Russia, sentenced for murder and recruited by Wagner. His motive was simple, to escape a 15-year jail term. At first, it was difficult to connect, but it quickly became clear this prisoner held some kind of rank. He showed no concerns about how others might perceive him. Even in captivity, Wagner seemed to carry a certain prestige. Then, he was interested in my experience at the hands of the Russians.
Лояльно относится администрация, то, что соблюдается в Женевской конвенции. А на самом-то деле, пока сюда едешь, ну, много чего, как бы, я год почти не появлялся, на свет не выходил. То есть подвал.
Before this prison, so this place is different because it was in some shelters, no sun for a long time. Yeah, funny man. I did not see sun because I go to two prisons. I go to a black site where all this bad shit happened, and then after I go to Makika, this not so bad.
The point of capture is often the most dangerous moment. The biggest threat isn't just the violence, it's the unpredictability. In those early days, you might find yourself in a makeshift prison, cellars, or hastily assembled holding areas as your journey through the system begins. People will want to know if you have any information that could save the lives of their comrades. The standards then are a world apart from what this prisoner is experiencing now. And interestingly, many of them wanted to tell us the same thing.
Ukrainian government, for example, bought this X-ray machine. It's very high price and it's brand new, but they need it because they have a lot of trauma.
When prisoners arrive, medical staff must quickly assess both their physical and mental state. That's no easy task, especially considering the wide range of nationalities Russia is throwing into this war and the murky, often chaotic methods used to recruit them. Murderers, rapists, professional soldiers, drug addicts, and perhaps worse. It's an eclectic patchwork of individuals, and what now passes for a Russian soldier is a heavily diluted reflection of the very worst in society.
Английском, да? Хорошо. Мы не снимаешь вашу сову, або...
Aiden interviews another prisoner with an unusual request. A young, polite man from the Middle East, fluent in both Russian and Arabic, he explained how he overstayed his visa in Russia, couldn't find work, and eventually ended up in court on drugs charges. Sadly, it's a familiar pattern. Many foreign recruits in Russia's army follow a similar path. Relaxed visa rules lure them in, and once they're stuck, jobless, or in trouble, the pressure begins. Go home or sign a contract. I spoke with a journalist tracking these cases. She told me that she received a copy of one contract from the family members, entirely in Russian, not in the recruit's native language. According to her, this setup is widespread. Middlemen, agents, and criminal networks are cashing in by funneling vulnerable migrants straight to Russia's front lines.
Does he want to be exchanged? Because that's where my next question is. And that's like more like does he want to be exchanged, like just in terms of like, because we want to be able to help spread awareness that there's foreigners in Ukrainian captivity that want to go home to Russia, and because we also have foreigners that are in Russian captivity.
Building rapport is crucial. Aiden and I understood early on just how valuable cigarettes were in prison. They're more than just a habit, they're currency. So we brought several packs with us to hand out to prisoners. Even the smallest win, a cigarette, a conversation, a moment of choice, can lift a prisoner's spirits. It's a psychological tactic many use to trick the mind into thinking there's still some control, some autonomy, even in captivity. Because in a place where everything is taken from you, even the illusion of choice can feel like freedom.
Like, is that? He doesn't have to answer it, but like, does he think that the whole court case against him in Russia was like true, or if it was a way for them to mobilize him?
It's true crime about drugs.
We wanted to set the record straight. He was, in fact, a convicted criminal. So we asked directly, did he acknowledge the charges against him? To his credit, he was honest. He admitted the wrongdoing and accepted that the charges were legitimate, but based on my own experience with the Russian judicial system, I remain sceptical. And above all, we had to be careful. Anything we show or say could put him at greater risk if he was ever sent back.
Okay.
So, сиди 1,5 года, потом у тебя арест, может, ты идешь на СВУ, и тоже иностранцам можно, типа, дают гражданство, и потом можно будут русские и будут воевать. Может, это не желание, кто хочет, кто не хочет.
And when in half a year prison, come militaries who tell you that it's a possibility to go on in army as well. It's a possibility to have citizenship and to finish your.
As you'll hear, this was a familiar pattern. Halfway through his sentence, he was given a choice: serve in the military or stay in prison. And prison in Russia is brutal. Many don't survive the system. The conditions are far worse than anything you'd see in the West. After the interview, and off record, he quietly asked us to contact his mother, just to let her know he's alive and okay. We'll come back to that later on. Back when I was in captivity, food was scarce. For the first 60 days, I survived on nothing more than a single mediocre slice of bread each day. Here, it was worlds apart. There are structured routines, new skills to learn, even practical trades like baking bread on the on-site bakery. The cooks, the chefs, all Russian POWs. In the metal workshop, Russian prisoners learned to craft furniture taught by professionals from a local company. Whatever your view on work in captivity, let me tell you this. After spending time in confinement, isolation cells and underground, the psychological strain becomes overwhelming. Work helps relieve that pressure. It gives purpose, rhythm, and a way to cope. And it's not just about passing time. It's transitional. The skills are transferable. They earn money, and they can spend it at the prison shop. Yes, there's a prison shop inside. And after clocking up their hours, the prisoners can actually buy things. It's not freedom, but it's the step towards dignity.
My name is Shaun. I'm not a journalist. I'm an ex-prisoner of the Russian Federation. I was a Ukrainian Marine, married to a Ukrainian, lived here since 2018, and I fought in Mariupol and was captured in Mariupol. So I know exactly the situation you're going.
After the introductions, our next interview was with another Middle Eastern immigrant serving as a Russian soldier. He spoke fluent English, which made things a little easier. He'd worked as a translator and had even been involved in recruiting foreign fighters, so he had a solid grasp of how the system really worked. One of his main questions, right at the start, was why immigrant soldiers weren't being included in prisoner exchanges. I explained one key issue: access. While Russia does allow some visits from the ICRC, the International Committee of the Red Cross, the ICRC have also stated that they do not have access to all prisoners of war in Russia. But during our time held in Russian captivity, we had no visits from any humanitarian organisation, especially the Red Cross. Whatever people might think of this prison, that is staged, sanitised, or just for the cameras, the reality is there's nothing even remotely comparable inside Russia that I witnessed or know about. During my own captivity, we were illegally tried. There were no visits from humanitarian organisations, no observers, and no access. Russia may be bound by the Third Geneva Conventions, but in practice, from my experience, there is very little oversight, accountability, but lots of silence in Russia to the atrocities being carried out on POWs. I will say this: a war crime is a war crime, no matter who perpetrates it. All who commit these crimes must be held accountable.
And if you go home, somebody else comes back here.
Yeah.
And we're trying to promote this through social media, but we're careful. We have to stay within the Geneva Convention, so your identity and everything else will not.
No, I studied 1 year After 1 year, I sit with my friends. They are like bad friend. You understand? I don't have control there because there is no family. I'm the bigger, and I do what I want. And I listen from my bad friend. Let's go to sign contract after that. Like, but you know the situation, and I go with them. But if you sign this contract, you can't go back.
No, yeah.
You can't. So
First of all, they say 6 months, and then they say end of SMO, correct?
yeah.
Sadly, it was again that familiar story, with a few subtle differences. He'd been sent to Russia by his family to study business and economics, but fell in with the wrong crowd. Somewhere along the line, the terms of his stay shifted, and the Russians altered the parameters of his contract. Now, we always have to be cautious. Some of these individuals could be lying, but when the same story keeps repeating itself, almost word for word, you start to recognise a pattern, and patterns often reveal the truth. What's becoming increasingly clear through these interviews is that money isn't always the primary motivator. For many of these foreign recruits, the initial driver is the hope of migration, of escaping poverty, of finding a better life far from the places they came from. Not all, of course. Some undoubtedly sign up for the money, and some, as odd as it may sound, are drawn to the structure that military life offers. But this man, he's as far from a soldier as you could imagine. What Putin is doing is weaponizing poverty, turning desperation into cannon fodder.
When I send it, I don't tell them. I don't tell them.
Yeah.
And they give me a good salary. They give me every month good salary, eat, food, enjoy, universities they pay, from my home in Russia they pay. I live in Dubai, no, yeah. I have good, family, they are living good. Inside home, with uniform, inside home with army, with Russian uniform, right? And my brother, he become crazy, What's that? Are you crazy or what? And he become crazy. First, he called my father in Dubai, Muhammad, do 1, 2, 3, 4. He in Russian army now. My father, he didn't believe him. Okay, I'm tired. I want to sleep now. Baba, I'm really talking. Your son, he's in Russian army. Why he did that? Why? After that, when I took my father, he shouted at me. He gave me a lot of word bad. Why? I give you a lot of things, what you need, what money you need. Why you did that? I tell him I don't know. No, this moment I don't know. My mind crazy.
Have you spoken to your family since you've been here?
I speak one time before 6 months ago.
Sadly, many of these foreign fighters, especially those without family in Russia or anyone to vouch for them, will likely remain in Ukraine until the end of the war. What's hard to hear is the faith they still place in the Russian system. They believe that because they hold a passport, they are Russian, that they are treated equally. And though they rarely say it outright, there's a strong sense that they see Ukraine as the reason they haven't been exchanged. Most of them have little to no understanding of how the Geneva Conventions work, how military exchanges are negotiated, or why, from Putin's perspective, they are strategically inconvenient to trade. Politically, it's even more complex. Many of them struggle to answer the most basic questions about the geopolitical situation. And that brings me back to why we are here. We didn't come to judge, to push the narrative, or lecture. We came to listen, to hear their stories as they see them.
Everyone, they take it, have Russian passports, they take it.
Okay.
Because of that, no, why they didn't change us? That's answer. I need answer for that.
Well, the main reason why we're wanting to speak to you guys specifically is because we want to try and promote the idea of both sides, like both Ukraine and Russia, agreeing to do a large, like, foreigner for foreigner exchange. Okay. Because there's a lot of foreigners in Russian captivity who fought for Ukraine. There's a lot of foreigners in, like, Ukrainian captivity who fought for Russia. So we're trying to promote the idea that we can get this to happen, because
this was a different case entirely. This man was from Africa, a professional soldier, someone with political problems back home. It's not always easy speaking with individuals like this. As I've said before, building rapport is crucial, but sometimes you just know they're not telling you the whole story. In fact, after this interview, we had a couple of others who would be claiming they were from countries they clearly or possibly weren't from. And that's important to understand. There are middlemen involved, criminal networks, people making serious money from trafficking foreign fighters into Russia's ranks and onto the front lines in Ukraine. What became clear in this particular interview was that he was protecting someone, or just didn't want to discuss some elements of his life. You could hear in what he wasn't saying. Or did he just want to stay in Ukraine?
Well, yeah, my faith kept me going from the majority of it, but it was also those around me. Like in my cell, I had another foreigner from Croatia. So now you know a bit about me. What can you tell us about yourself?
I've been here as a prisoner of war for 16 to 17 months now. I'm still here on hostages. That led me to travel to Russia, because though I tried a lot, I tried so many countries, at least I can have visa to travel to another country, but no avail. When I applied for Russian visa and I got it, so I decided to move to Russia because my life was under serious threat in countries, and also I want to chase my daughter's dreams. Like she was always telling me, she told me always that I want to be a medical doctor. But first, when I started my interview, Ukraine Media Center,
and that's where we had to end the interview, at least for you, the audience. Once the conversation turns to families, personal danger, children, or political persecution, we have to draw the line. Sometimes you'll just have to take our word for it. The last thing we want to do is put anyone at any further risk. But it brings us back to the same point. It's incredibly hard to know how much of what you're hearing is the full truth. Some of these individuals may have been in captivity for a long time, repeating the same story over and over. Eventually, it can start to sound rehearsed or even hollow, or it sounds like you're lying. And that's the challenge, trying to read between the lines when you're sitting face to face with someone who may be guarded, broken, or just desperately holding on to a version of the truth that they might think will keep them alive, makes the interview impossible to continue.
So based on that, I fortunate to got one.
What truly surprised me was the trust prison guards placed in the inmates, the freedoms, the tools, the access. It was unexpected, to be fair. But then Dostoevsky's words echoed in my mind. The degree of civilization in a society can be judged by entering its prisons. And in that moment, at least some of it made sense.
We don't want to jeopardize anything when you go to exchange. Yeah. Try not to look behind, because we don't want the details of your face being seen.
Only for you.
Yeah, it's more for your personal safety and security when you do get exchanged, because it's security back home.
I understand. So exchange is a possibility for us.
I mean, we were held captive and exchanged, so it's always a possibility.
The questions we wanted to ask, we couldn't. We weren't there to force them to relive trauma or push them into places they weren't ready to go. And we were bound, rightly, by the Geneva Conventions. What mattered most was listening. And as we did, we began to understand far more than we expected. Above all, we wanted to offer something they desperately needed: hope. Not despair, not doubt. We'd lived that. And for me, that was far worse than anything the system could throw at you. But like so many others, the first thing this interviewee asked, after the introductions, was simple. Is there a chance I'll be exchanged? We couldn't promise him anything, but we could give him hope. And sometimes that's everything.
Mariupol, and obviously, with what the situation was there, like we were encircled, we got pretty.
And I have been as a prisoner of war here, specifically at this camp, for 1 year.
Mm-hmm. We knew headed into the prison that we'd encounter all kinds of people. From my own past, I'd seen the full spectrum: novice offenders, career criminals, drug dealers, even a cannibal. And then the soldiers, some professional, some deserters, some didn't even get that far and refused to fight after being mobilised. All with different levels of knowledge and worldviews. You have to approach each conversation differently. One man stood out. He was from South America, having crossed through a partner nation of Ukraine before reaching Russia. It wasn't just his journey, it was how he carried himself, his composure, his build, the way he spoke fluent, precise English. There was no doubt he was a soldier, and quite possibly a true believer in Russia's cause. He openly told us where he worked, with whom, for how long. We were in no doubt then that our presumption was indeed correct. I mention this only because it shows the diversity within Russia's ranks. In just a short time, we met so many faces, each one different, and with each, we had to adapt, shift our tone, rephrase our approach. No two conversations were ever the same.
Holding, what do you think of this idea?
Well, we have listened a lot of things about exchange, about deportation also, and the third option about a possible Ukrainian citizen. Few days ago, we received here at this camp one coordinator. I don't know exactly his position, but he said for prisoners of war who hasn't a Russian passport physically, only three options. The first option is 7 years as a prisoner of war, and later you receive a Ukrainian passport, and then we will be free. The second option is about deportation to out my country without any document, without anything. And the third option is about a possible exchange, but few chances. Very small chance, actually.
Of all the men we spoke to, this one saw the truth more clearly than most. Ukraine officials had even offered him options, and a year on, he was still weighing them in. Foreign fighters like him allured him by promises, high pay, generous bonuses, far more than they'd ever make at home. But the harsh reality, Russia doesn't want them back. With no family in Russia, there's no one to fight for them. And if they were exchanged, they return home with stories. Real stories. Stories about the lies, the brutal conditions and the horrors of war Putin desperately wants to keep hidden. That's the risk for the Kremlin. And the money they were promised? Once they're out, once they're back in their home countries, it vanishes. Russia will make sure of that. Just one more broken promise in a war built on betrayal. It became clear why so many of them feared deportation. For some, returning home might mean freedom. For others, it might just mean silence with no chance of their dreams being realised.
Exchange?
Yes, of course. I think 100% here want to go back to Russia. Actually, the simple reason, because in Russia we have right now as a veteran, as a new status when you go back to Russia, some benefits.
Yeah,
of course.
It's
100%.
Ukrainian military.
Exactly. So I think it's much better we go back to Russia than our countries. For example, right now I really don't know if I got to the jail or not.
Yeah.
My fellows here same. So we have no guarantees about.
Many of Russia's foreign fighters live with one constant fear, ironically: prison. in their own countries, it's not something I had to worry about. From my experience, these fighters tend to fall into three categories: runaways, believers, and killers. Runaways are escaping something: addiction, a criminal record, or just the dull weight of ordinary life. Some come chasing war just for the clicks and views, hoping to fast-track their YouTube fame from a safe distance somewhere far from the front lines in western Ukraine. Then there are the believers, often with no military background but fiercely loyal, strangely dependable, because they think they're fighting for something bigger than themselves. And finally, the killers. Not just psychopaths, but professional soldiers and others. People with solid principles who generally thrive in war. For them, the chaos makes sense in a way civilian life never could. What I learned in captivity is this: good people, in most cases, are still good people, even if they believe every word that comes out of Putin's mouth.
And Shaun, like, we're just using our leverage that we have as being ex-POWs because people do listen to us when we speak, and we are trying to like push this forward because like there's like quite a few foreigners here, and there's quite a few foreigners on the other side, and it's a similar situation where we've got like British, we've got Egyptian, African.
We know about that.
Yeah.
I'm a former Marine who's married to Ukraine and my family are Ukrainian. I think it's fair to say that quite a lot of people find homes in countries not necessarily they were born in. I was one of them. I lived in Mariupol. I learned Russian first.
Around 2 weeks later, Aiden, myself and John Hardin, another former POW and defender of Mariupol, were invited to speak at the UK Parliament Roundtable by Lord Glasman. With the Ukrainian embassy and a representative from the headquarters for the treatment of prisoners of war, prominent Ukrainian journalists and UA Beyond, a civic organisation highlighting the current challenges faced by Ukrainian British-born soldiers and Russia's systematic violations of prisoners' rights, we shared our experiences. How we were denied POW status under the Geneva Conventions, paraded through Russian media without due process, and branded as Nazi, mercenaries and terrorists long before any so-called trial began. This, despite holding legal contracts with Ukrainian Marines and serving within the laws of armed conflict. In the end, we weren't given justice. We were handed death sentences in a sham trial designed to send a message, not to deliver the truth.
This needs to change. Under the Third Geneva Convention, I fought for the Ukrainian military. I'm not a foreign fighter. It doesn't matter where you come from if you fight for the Ukrainian military. The term foreign fighter is a Russian narrative. It's a mercenary narrative that I was tagged with when I was captured.
All right, I'm getting the record. I'm going to call his mother right now.
Remember the POW who asked us to call his mother? Let's end on something positive. The only person that I knew who spoke Arabic was my friend Brahim. Brahim was also given the death penalty with us in Donetsk, and he kindly stepped in to pass on the message. We've since contacted her with the proper team, so she can finally have a line of communications with her son. We don't know what happened or why she hasn't communicated with him, or if the Russian authorities have even informed her of where he is, but we will look into this further. Legally, we can't share what we said, but what matters is this. She was relieved. She hadn't received word of her son for several months, and we told her he was fine and well. We kept our word. In a war full of broken promises, that has to mean something, I hope.